Hello everybody. We're going to take some pictures and we're going to review the MC105 f2.8 VR S lens from Nikon. And it's a pretty incredible lens. It's a macro lens, yes, but it's much more than a macro lens. It's a mid-telephoto lens that has all kinds of uses. It's a great portrait lens. It's a great landscape lens. It's a great product photography lens. But frankly, I don't care. Even though I'll use it for those things, I don't really care today. Today, I care about this as a macro lens. This is a pro level lens. It doesn't have much wrong with it. It's sharp, it's fast, it's accurate, it's beautiful, it's light. It's got a lot going for it. We're at the top of the bluff. This is normally a great place for finding interesting insects, usually where I come to look for agapostemon bees and other colourful Hymenoptera. But it looks like they've cut everything down up here. So yeah, it's normally a lot more verdant than this. This is where we'll be for the next little bit, and hopefully we'll find something to take a picture of. So the lens we're testing today is the Nikon Z-mount 105 f2.8. It replaces the F-mount 105 2.8, a much loved lens. It's lighter. It's more modern looking. It's got all kinds of cool gadgets on it, like a programmable button to do all kinds of different things, as well as an aperture ring that you can use if you want. Most of that is more useful when you're using the lens for things other than macro, in my opinion. But as a macro lens, it's all about the optics, as well as a little bit about the balance and the feel. I've been impressed with the lens. Let's see how this thing operates out in nature. We're going to take some pictures. Let me see what I can find. I'm not going to get into all of the technical stuff about the lens. You can read about that. I mean, it's got everything. It's got every coating that Nikon makes, and several I didn't even know they made. It's got something like 11 groups containing 16 separate elements. So it's a very complicated, internally focusing, vibration-damped lens. According to the documentation Nikon has online, it has something like 4.5 stops of vibration control. I've read somewhere else that it's closer to 6 stops, and I think that what I didn't see on the Nikon site was any reference to using this lens with the Z8, which is the camera I'm using it with today. Let me talk just a little bit about the setup that I'm using, because this will make a difference. I am using the brand new Z8, and I am using for my lighting an old favorite, the R1C1 compact macro flash that fits onto the lens. Now, this lighting system is the subject of a separate video. So for today, it's just going to be taking some pictures with this very simple setup. I'll be shooting at probably f8 or thereabouts, so we get a little bit of depth of field, because I probably won't do a lot of focus stacking today in the field. We'll be using flash, so I'll be able to keep my shutter speed up around 1/200th, and all of the vibration dampening stuff isn't really going to matter when you're using flash, which always made me wonder why they put it in macro lenses, but that's a separate issue. So let's get going, see what we can find, and hopefully we'll have some nice pictures to show you. One other word about the setup that I'm using. I wanted to diffuse the flash, but I didn't actually have access to the SB200 diffusion cap, so I'm using some Mylar, but it's doing a good job. There's not really much need for flash today. It's very, very bright out. In addition to being very bright, it's almost insect-free today for some reason. It's as if they came up here and chopped down all the flowers. I hear a bird. That's promising. He must think there's bugs up here. Anyway, things will come around. There's a tiny little butterfly. Let's see. Finding focus with this system initially is not dead simple. You'll hear a lot of reviews in which people extol the praises of the autofocus on this lens. It does have a good autofocus. It's snappy, it's responsive, usually. I have found that as you get closer in and the light drops off, the focus becomes quite sluggish, and it does actually do a fair amount of hunting. So I would always use this lens with a view to jumping into focus for it at an instant's notice. I've missed a couple of shots trying to use the autofocus, even when you have it set on the limited range, which is actually only from 0.3 to 0.5 meters, which is like from 12 to 16 inches, something like that. That's a very narrow band, and if your subject is out of that even by a little bit, it's not going to focus on it. It's like any other focusing issue with macro. It depends on your style of shooting as to whether or not it's important to you. Most of the best lenses and the best macro lens I've ever used is a completely manual lens, and I never even think about it when I'm using a lens like that. So I think the autofocus is more helpful to me when I'm using this lens to do a portrait or landscape. I've done several other things with this lens, and it shoots. It's just a great mid-telephoto lens for whatever you plan to do with it. If you like the 105 focal length, you're going to like this lens. It's made of plastic, and at first I thought that's a problem, to make a $1,000 lens out of plastic. And then I thought, well, you know what? If it wasn't plastic, it wouldn't be $1,000. And I think, I don't know this, I'm guessing here, I think that's why Nikon did it. They wanted to keep the price of this particular lens low enough that it would be accessible to most people, I guess, most people. But to do so, they couldn't make it out of metal. They couldn't make it in Japan. So they outsourced it, and it's made to very high specifications. It is beautiful. It feels great. It feels much more substantial than maybe it actually is. But they were able to keep the cost at $950, $960, something like that, which is very reasonable for a lens as good as this. And it is good. It is sharp from corner to corner. It has essentially no chromatic aberration unless you absolutely go looking for it with high contrast and bright light. It doesn't have much in the way of distortion, which is thanks to the multiple special elements. It has 16 elements in 11 groups, including, I think, 3 ED elements, the special dispersion glass, which limits the amount of chromatic aberration, but it also has a spherical elements to reduce the geometric aberration. So it's a very clean, very sharp lens. It's not the sharpest macro lens. It's probably about as sharp as the 105, possibly a little more, and definitely a little more towards the edges. But it's not as sharp as the f4 200mm. Not in my opinion, anyway. This will be the first time I have ever come up to this park and not seen at least one agapostemon bee. It's clouded up a bit now, so I'm going to try my luck here in the shade up at the top. I can see the biggest value of this lens being for the photographer who actually has multiple interests. It is a very good macro lens, but I would feel a little bit like I was being extravagant to buy a lens with all of this functionality only to use it as a manual macro lens. It's a shame Nikon doesn't put out a lens of this length or possibly a bit longer that is just a manual macro lens that doesn't have the bells and whistles that you don't really need and don't use. But then again, it's good to have a lens that does all that this lens will do. Let me tell you one thing that this lens loses points for. Unfortunately, this new lens, the MC105, is not compatible with Nikon's Z teleconverters, which is a real shame, and I wonder why in the world that compatibility wouldn't be built in. I'm sure that there must be a technical reason that it wasn't. I hope it wasn't a business reason, but it does rather suggest that possibly there might be a 200mm lens in the offing at some point. That would be nice. But anyway, for the time being, any dreams you had of taking your new Z8 and throwing a 200mm macro lens on it, forget about it. Not going to happen. I've already talked about all of the incredible features that this camera has on offer, and they're all useful in macro photography. It's lovely to have this super fast raw burst mode, and the low light performance is fantastic. The autofocus is pretty decent. The in-body stabilization, when combined with the stabilization built into the lens, does make for some pretty impressively still shots. But it's also a bit overkill for what I use the lens for. 90% of the time I'm using flash. I'm freezing the action with very short flash duration, and I don't really have much need for all of that image stabilization. It's not really a macro feature, just like the autofocus really isn't. But I suppose I shouldn't complain. It's nice to have it if you ever need it. And of course, it's invaluable when you start hand-holding and shooting, the landscape you're in or the people that are staring at you, that type of thing. Should I photograph them? Okay, I'll see if I can do it without being spotted. No, they saw as soon as I lifted the camera up. I feel like I've exhausted my opportunities up here on the bluff. Let's go down to the swamp, see if there's anything down there. Maybe all the bugs have gone away to a cooler place for the summer. Could be. Huh. Gone. When they talk about the insect extinction, they are not joking. I have never seen it like this before. Let's head somewhere else, try our luck. Oh, hang on. It was just a fly. Let's go down the bottom. So I came down to the bottom part of the park, and the blazing sun has been replaced by clouds and wind. It's a bit like it was the first time I was out here with the camera, the Z8. At least there's a lot of bugs down here now. So let's see if we can get some decent pictures down here, and then I'm going to tell you a few more things about the lens as we go. you are. What are you doing in here? You're supposed to be out with me. It's been a strange day. Well, there's not much else I want to do today. I mean, I've given the lens a good testing. So let's head back to the house and we'll look at some of these pictures, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the lens before I give you my opinion. And if you'd like, you can actually sit up front for the ride back. I'll give you a hand. So we're on our way back to the house where I'm going to wrap this video up. But before we get there, I wanted to impart a little bit of wisdom to you. It's really kind of obvious, and when you hear it, you'll say, well, that's not wisdom, but it is wisdom. If you want to take great macro photographs, you have to take a lot of photographs, which means you have to go out into nature often. If you're only going out once every few months, like unfortunately I have been doing lately, you're not likely to get many great photographs. You get out of practice for one thing, but more importantly, you're just not taking the pictures. You can't even accidentally take a good picture if you're not taking pictures. So I would encourage you, you're probably better off going out into your own back garden, if you're lucky enough to have one, for half an hour every now and again, than you are going out once every 6 months for 10 hours. Just a thought. We're home. It's been a long day and it's not quite over yet. I still have a lot of pictures to go through. It wasn't the best day, but it wasn't the worst, and there'll be plenty more. This is a lens that any macro photographer would want to have in their bag. It's a beauty. If you're a Nikon shooter, this is really a no-brainer. It is the new 105. It's also a great portrait lens. It's a great urban landscape lens. It's a great product lens, a great people lens. It's just a great lens. There's nothing much about it that should deter you. I am sure that most of the issues that I had with it are issues more with me than with the lens. It's $1,000 that will be well spent. I think the day will come when these aren't $1,000 anymore, and we'll wish we all got one when they were. This lens is sure to become a classic in time, and I rather like the new design. I really do. It's a beautiful piece of gear, and I recommend it highly. If you're a Nikon shooter, or even if you're not, maybe it's time you became one. But certainly anybody with a Z camera who's watching my channel likes macro. That's the lens to beat. I hope you found this discussion of the MC105 f2.8S useful. And I also hope you find the next one useful, which is going to be a discussion all about Nikon's in-house flashes. I want to take just another minute to thank Susan Seaford for the loan of this lens, this camera, the R1C1 and all the other flash units. It's just been fantastic to be able to get my hands on this very new, very exciting gear. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you decide to buy one of these things, do it on one of my links if you would, so I could use the help, and it doesn't cost you anything, and I'd be most grateful. Thanks again for watching. Have a good day, and I'll catch up with you later. Goodbye.